Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We'll begin with our session, Immersing Your Audience with the Dolby Atmos Experience. I would like the audience to please be seated. Dolby Atmos was first introduced in cinemas a little over 10 years back, but today the popularity of Dolby Atmos has grown beyond cinematic content. Dolby Atmos provides audiences the most engaging immersive experience, not only in the cinemas but also in homes, on the move, and for different types of content. Live sports, Atmos music, mobile and console gaming, podcasts, movies, and even TVs. This session covered in an interesting detail by Bhaskar Pal, Content Lead India ME Africa at Dolby India, will focus on the possibilities that exist today for immersive content creation. May we please have Bhaskar Pal on stage, please? Bhaskar Pal is a graduate of the Film and Television Institute of Pune, India, having specialized in sound recording and sound engineering. He joined Dolby as a sound consultant in the year 2000, and his experience spans over 2 decades in the film and television industry in various capacities. Audience, please give a round of applause for Mr. Bal. We'll now begin the session.
Very good morning to you all. And it's a pleasure to have this opportunity to talk about the opportunities with Dolby Atmos. Last year, I don't know how many of you were present. I did a session which was to do with designing studios and the considerations for setting up mix rooms for near field Atmos. That was a bit technical. I don't know how many of you are already familiar with Atmos. So I have, especially this time, kept a very simple session. I will be just talking about, all the opportunities that exist with Dolby Atmos as a format for creating immersive content. I won't be really doing any technical demos here, so that is not the scope of this session. But yes, we can talk, after the session if anybody is interested to know any more, any details. And I would really like to thank Smitha and Mr. Anil Chopra for this opportunity, and obviously Palm Expo to be able to present to you and talk about you. Thank you all for sparing your time. How many of you are, I know a few of you, so some familiar faces. Some are from music and some live background. How many of you are into music? Music, live mixing. Anybody doing post, AV post? Okay. So it's a mix of everything, which means that I will have to be stuck to the podium. I can't be moving around freely, but that's okay. So, I've been with Dolby, like Smita said, that it's been almost over 2 decades. I started off with live recordings for television, and then I did some work in the film and all that. Then I joined Dolby, and it's been a long journey of over 20 years with Dolby. It's been a great experience. So our motto in Dolby is to create spectacular experiences, both in the audio and in visuals. So most of you would probably know Dolby as a pioneer in audio technologies, but we have gone beyond audio. And now we also have amazing technologies for the visuals, and we do a lot of other work. So that's our motto, and like probably most of you know that Dolby Atmos was a format that was developed for cinemas, and it was launched in 2012. So it's more than 11 years now, and this is just a very brief, you should be able to see this. So it all started with the Disney Pixar film, Brave. That was the first Dolby Atmos theatrical movie, and released in 2012 in June. So we're pretty much like 11 years now. And then within 3 years, the technology developed to be able to bring that experience to the living rooms, people in their homes. And then from there, we moved on to bringing the experience onto other devices like mobile devices, and also into live broadcast and live streaming. And the latest is that it is also available for cars. So that's the latest. I mean, long back, if some of you knew, Dolby did bring 5.1 audio into automobiles. But I think because of lack of content, that didn't really take off. Now, with Atmos, this is really doing very well. And there will be some good news which you'll hear about Indian automotive brands launching their models with Dolby Atmos sound support. So that's a very brief history. I don't want to get into that. So like we said, it all started off in the cinemas, and then it moved very quickly within 3 years into homes. And today we have all these other areas where you can experience Dolby Atmos. So there's broadcast, and I'll come to that in a while. There's gaming, there's obviously music is pretty big. So there's a lot of interest in creating music in Atmos, and we'll talk a little more about it. Then there's podcast. So I don't know if any of you do any bit of podcast work, but podcast is a great opportunity as I see it for Dolby Atmos. I'll explain why. And obviously then there's Dolby Atmos Live. So, sorry, yeah. So if you see the last picture on the bottom, I mean, for you it's the right corner. So that's the Dolby Atmos Live venue in MGM Park, Las Vegas. So some of the top musicians and artists perform, residencies over there. So they have a week-long, 10 days long performances, and it's like booked, I mean, house full. So it's really growing very popular. Santana did a performance very recently, sometime I think early this year or late last year. So you can see that although a lot of people think that Dolby Atmos is for cinemas and maybe for content for OTT, that's not really true. I mean, you have so much more. There's music, which is big. There's gaming, which is there. You can experience gaming in Atmos, and I'll explain why Atmos adds certain benefits in those content genres. And then obviously podcast. So that is another big area. So what is new? I mean, the technology was there since 12 years, but when you move from the cinema to the home to the mobile device, so the technology has to adapt and to bring you that same experience, that premium experience, that immersive experience. So that is where the development is ongoing. So every time certain things need to be tweaked, and the beauty is that you have a very, very consistent experience across all possible playback devices or playback environments. So let's start with what is the most exciting event happening right now for the last 2 months. So IPL has been probably, I don't know, probably everybody is a cricket fan here, right? So if you did not know till today, IPL has been broadcast live from day one in Atmos. So on Star HD Sports, on the English and Hindi channel SD1. So it's been broadcast live in Atmos, as well as Jio Cinema has been doing a live stream on their Jio Cinema app for the 4K channel. So it's been broadcast and live streamed in Atmos. It's been produced in venue in Atmos and live streamed or broadcast. So if you have a home theater system which is Atmos capable, the finals are still left. So if you have missed it, you can enjoy the finals in Dolby Atmos sound. The whole idea is to bring the stadium experience to home. I mean, it should give you that feel that you're actually watching the match, sitting in the gallery in the stadium. So that's the beauty. I mean, yeah, till now you are hearing stereo, and that was fine. I mean, 5.1 was also being broadcast for a few years. But the Atmos experience really takes it to the next level. So IPL was really big, and this has been a work in progress for a long time. I mean, we had been working on this proof of concept with Star for almost 4 years. Then pandemic happened, so people couldn't go into the stadiums, and the whole idea of doing it in Atmos didn't seem very real. So finally this year, we could actually have the IPL on air in Atmos. And as you can see, Disney Hotstar, so they were basically broadcasting. Star was broadcasting it. Airtel and Tata Play are the two services that carry the Atmos signal, and on Jio Cinema app, so you have live streaming on the Jio app. Then we have our podcast. So now I think not many of you are familiar with podcasts, but I think there's a growing interest in podcasts, and podcast is a very ideal content for using that immersive format of sound. So Dolby Atmos, because podcast is essentially audio storytelling. There's no visual, so you can actually kind of get into the minds of the listener by actually explicitly designing the sound in such a way that the audience, when he is hearing that podcast, he imagines himself to be in that space where he can hear all those sounds. He can actually feel that environment where the whole action is happening, and Dolby Atmos really lends very well to this audio storytelling. I don't know how many of you have in your childhood experienced those audio plays that used to come on radio. It used to be really interesting. I mean, you just sit in front of the radio and listen as if somebody's telling you a story, and you could visualize the whole thing. With Atmos, again, that goes to a next level, because everybody is imagining something, but so every individual would be imagining something different. But for the content creator, it's important to convey a same or a similar stage, or the environment that you want that person to kind of visualize. So with Atmos, since you are actually putting in all those clues in terms of audio elements in the mix, like what it is supposed to be, so then the likelihood is that everybody is kind of visualizing the same space. So you're not really, so that's the whole idea, because the director's intent or the creator's intent translates very well across every listener. Okay, so these are some of the podcast services that one can experience. You have Earshot, you have Hangama. They carry podcasts, and then Times of India have their podcast channels, and obviously there's Amazon Prime, so they carry a lot of podcasts. Then we have gaming. Mobile gaming is something. I mean, there are games. You have the Xbox, you have the PS series of gaming consoles and stuff like that. So there are games for those, but mobile gaming is very big. And what you see here is what we have done in India. So I'm talking specifically or putting data or statistics of what we have achieved in India. So in India, we have managed to get 3 mobile games in Atmos. Now, gaming, I think a lot of you would be very, very, interested and involved in gaming. So gaming is something where you need to understand your environment, because most of the games are interactive, like you're interacting with, either other players, or you're interacting with the environment that you see. And you need to know what's happening in front as well as what is happening behind your back. And that is where surround immersive audio experience, that gives you certain clues, and it really helps to engage you better in the gaming experience. The other thing is what we have also seen, that with Dolby Atmos or immersive experience, your reaction to the gaming, I mean, the reaction time to what you need to do, that improves significantly. I mean, this has been proven by, research, that it really helps. If you're just hearing normal stereo, it's not as good. I mean, obviously, it'll be good, but Atmos really helps to engage you better and get that, uh, reflex or the timing, much, much better. Because you have so much more, clues in that 3D environment, like somebody trying to sneak on you from the back. So what do? You turn around, you do something. So you get those clues much better, and you know what to do. What is your next step? So these are the three games that we have in Dolby Atmos. So again, cricket being one of, it's almost like a religion in India, right? So Epic Cricket Games, that's one of the interesting games that is available in Atmos. And then very recently we have released these Flows of Fear and Tanaji. So if anybody is avid gamer, you can explore these. And obviously, I mean, this is something taken for granted. I mean, content for cinema and content for OTT. I mean, AV content, entertainment content, that is always there. And today we have, when we started our journey, we had only Netflix, then we had Amazon Prime Video, and then came in Disney Hotstar. But today, as you can see, we have pretty much all the important OTT services that you would regularly access content on. Each one of them is enabled for Dolby Atmos. Just imagine the kind of growth in kind of content that you're seeing, and the kind of demand for immersive content. All of these platforms have almost either mandated the highest form of content to be like Dolby Atmos, or they would say they prefer to have content in Dolby Atmos rather than stereo 5.1. So, and very soon you will hear one more name getting added to it. In fact, there's a very popular web series which is launching the season 2. So you can keep guessing. It'll be, on air in just a few days' time. And that on this other service will now be in Dolby Atmos. So the point is that, we have a whole lot of content that is being created and consumed in this Dolby Atmos immersive format. And there's this huge opportunity. So today I just wanted to talk about, how big is that momentum and what all you can focus on, in terms of taking a lead to take advantage of this opportunity. So you can see that so many, these are all titles that have been released. Obviously, you can't put everything on there. And in India today, with all those services, the OTT services journey has been very short. It's been roughly about 3 to 4 years, and take out the 2 years of pandemic in between. So it's hardly about 2.5 years of journey where all this content has, finally come up. So we have more than 180 movies and episodic content, the originals that are there. And now, only last year we had enabled Sun Next, Z, Sony Live. So these are very recent additions, and they have just started, acquiring content in Dolby Atmos as well as Vision. So since most of you are audio engineers, I'm talking about audio today. And that demand is just getting bigger and bigger. It's exponentially rising. So there's that huge scope. And then, obviously, we have people here who are into music. So I don't want to take away, the music angle. It's huge. If any of you have heard songs and music in Atmos, you will realize that it does give you a complete different experience over regular stereo. You can actually imagine, the entire song being performed like right in front of you. You get that full 3D stage of the music performance. You can feel the depth in the different instruments. You can feel the space, and it gives you that full 3D envelope. Once you listen to it, and like a lot of artists have, said that once they've heard their music in Dolby Atmos, they don't like going back to stereo. It's just that, you feel so much is missing. And although this is not related to music, this is related to web series content. So this was an incident just last week. So the original mix was done in 5.1. And then when we suggested that they should, it's an interesting web series and it would do justice to have it in Atmos. So they were a little skeptical, and then they said, okay, let's do a 10-minute sequence and see what the experience is like. What is the difference in that experience? And when they heard that 10 minutes of that sequence, which was redone in Atmos, the director was watching the final 10 minutes being played back, and I was looking at his face and I was seeing his expression. You could see a smile gradually, growing. And then when we stopped, and then he immediately said, during that 5.1 mix, he had to actually pull down a lot of elements that were there in the scene because it wasn't cutting through properly. And it was actually disturbing. But now he felt, once it was mixed in Atmos, he felt that there's this huge space and it's empty. They said, and if you bring up those elements, it adds to the beauty of the scene, but without distracting. So that was a very interesting, observation that he made. And that entire episode, all those 7 episodes of the web series have been now remixed in Atmos. That is what will release very soon. So that's the kind of, real world, experiences that people actually talk about. With Atmos, you can hear so much more details. You can hear the imaging, the separation. Because of the separation, there is more clarity, and without having to actually, raise the levels of those elements. So they don't disturb you or distract you, but they add beauty to the scene. And this is not only for cinematic content. This can do justice to actually any genre of content. There's this whole misconception or myth that, Atmos is good for action movies. Okay, but that's not true, because the way we listen to anything around us, we tend to, experience the space, the depth, the direction of where the sound is coming from, that precise direction. In channel-based formats, you can't achieve that. Okay, so you cannot really create that specific, pinpoint direction of a sound that is coming from anywhere around you or above you. With Atmos, you can do that. Okay, I'll just explain quickly how that happens. And I already talked about this, that what is the opportunity? What do creators benefit from? So it is obviously that, there are 3 basic things, and I'll just talk about it in a little more detail. I think we are running out of time, so I'll explain it with the next slide. So as creators, you have more creative freedom. Whenever you're working on a medium, you want to have the biggest palette. Think of yourself as a painter with a big, canvas, and you want to paint that, if that canvas is 3D instead of 2D, that will give you so much more scope to present your sound design or your, sound mix in a much more engaging way. So that is the whole idea. So yeah, you can actually whatever you could not do with channel-based formats because it was kind of limiting. Nothing wrong. It was just that you had channel-based formats till few years back. So anything in the surround zone would not have that specific imaging or the sense of direction coming from a particular point in space. That was lacking. And that is why you always felt a distance. With Dolby Atmos, with that 3D environment being created so well, you can actually draw the audience inside the story. They feel that they are within that scene happening. So they get much more drawn into it. The attention is much better. So as a creator, you really benefit from having the full attention. That is how it helps. Obviously, there is with Atmos you can make your content more dynamic and lifelike. I mean, I just explained very briefly that you can actually recreate that full 3D space like we hear or perceive sound in real life. And how do we do it? We do it with what we call the objects. So we'll very briefly talk about it because I think I would like to have you ask some questions at the end of it. So I kind of skip a couple of slides because if you see, I already indirectly mentioned all the points that you see on the slide there. So there's a deeper engagement. And so one thing is that when you mix in Atmos, there's a point which says simplified workflows. So basically what it means is that when you mix in Atmos, you're creating your content in the highest format. And that's a immersive 3D audio format. From this, you can derive, without having to create a separate mix, you can derive a 7.1 or a 5.1 or a stereo mix. So it becomes very seamless and very simple. And what you derive as a 5.1 mix, for example, from the Atmos, will sound better than a native 5.1 mix for the simple reason that the kind of information that you've created in that Atmos mix, when it renders down into 5.1, still has that feel of that 3D space, which would not be possible to create in the channel-based 5.1 format to start with. So these are things, I mean, talking doesn't really make sense. That's why, ideally I like to do these sessions where you can also have a demo, but unfortunately, that doesn't, it's not feasible for this expo. And I'll quickly just wrap up by introducing you to what exactly object-based surround here. I think some of you are already familiar, but for those who are new, so when we say Dolby Atmos is an object-based surround sound, it sounds like some very fancy, some technical jargon. But actually, it's not that. It's very simple. So think of this venue, for example. You're all seated there. Right now, you're hearing me talk. And beyond this room, you can hear certain activities. Okay. So every sound source that we hear in real life is a point source. I mean, the source of the sound is always a single point, and then it spreads. Now, in channel-based deliveries or mixing of formats, you cannot create these individual sources of sound because you don't have that technology to place sounds anywhere in that space. What we do with Atmos is we take individual elements of sound and say these are like objects. So you can place them anywhere in the three-dimensional space that you want to create. And while it might sound very difficult or complex, it's actually very simple. Because you don't have to worry about how you do it. You have a 3D panner which pretty much looks and operates like your regular panning tool. Only thing is it has an additional height element. So you can take any sound, and just place it anywhere in this 3D space. And it will actually be reproduced from exactly that same point in space in any particular room that it is reproduced in. So the translation is always based on the 3D coordinates, the XYZ coordinates of the sound. So whether the room is big, small, rectangular, more squarish, or whatever it is, the position of the image of that sound is always locked in space, the way you decided it to be. So in channel-based sound, you had only, like for stereo, you had only two channels in front, so things could only be coming from left or right. You had some scope of, frontal 2D kind of space, but nothing beyond that. With Atmos, we're trying to recreate everything that we hear in real life. You're creating that different sounds coming from different directions. I mean, I think that conveys it. So traditionally, what we used to do in 5.1 or 7 mixes is we used to have a channel-based distribution. So whatever the number of elements, you would finally kind of distribute it to a fixed number of channels. In Atmos, we call that channel-based output as a bed. Just a nice term to create that feeling that it's the basic layer or a bed, and then you can decorate that with more individual sound elements. So there are the pros and cons of using a bed and using objects. So I won't go into the details, but I mean, you can understand that. I'll give you a very brief example, that things which need to be spread out, like ambient sounds. So it's always easy to put it in a bed, because the moment you put it in a bed, it spreads out, through the entire multiple speakers in that channel, and it does exactly what it is supposed to do, fill up the space. Where you want very specific sounds or very specific, direction of sounds to come from, then you treat them as objects, and you place them using the 3D panner. That's how you create a mix with a combination of the bed and the objects. This is how a typical, studio looks like. I mean, that's a very high-end, the Bluebird studio. This has some of the best acoustics, some of the most high-end, speakers, everything. Sounds absolutely great. I mean, I've not been there, but everybody knows, how great it sounds. Then you have a more usual regular studio. That's how a typical near-field Atmos mix room would look like. And typically what we recommend is a 714 setup. So when we say a 714, it means that the number of output channels that you're using to monitor your mix. It does not mean that the Atmos mix is a 714. So this is the point where a lot of people still get confused. So in an Atmos mix, I'll just sum it up. The Atmos mix is actually a mix which has up to 128 tracks of audio. So when you're doing a 5.1 mix, to make it simple to understand, your final output is 6 tracks of audio. So what you deliver as a 5.1 mix has only 6 tracks of audio. Each track of audio or each channel is dedicated to a particular speaker channel. In Atmos, you have up to 128 tracks of audio in the final master. You can use up to all of the 128, or you can use fewer. But the more objects you use, the better your spatial reproduction and the better the immersive experience. So, I mean, the Atmos renderer is what takes care of the entire monitoring during your mixing. So when you create, the creation process is actually fairly simple. You pretty much mix like you would do a normal mix, just that instead of assigning everything to a 5.1 bus, you assign some things to a bus which is now a wider. It has 712 channels. So 7.1 you all understand, and the 7.12 is like now 2 additional overhead feeds for the overhead channel. So in Atmos, depending on the room size and the number of speakers, the speakers can work, multiple speakers can work as a single channel, or they can work as individual channels. So that's how it works. So when you put some things in the bed, it goes to the channel-based outputs, which spreads across multiple speakers. And when you treat them as objects, you can actually specify a particular position in the 3D space. So that's how your image clarity, the sense of direction, the depth, all of that comes out. There's a short video, I'll just play it.
Mixing in Atmos introduces the element of height, as seen here in the renderer's object view. Sounds can now be placed above the listener, as well as all around them. Here we see a traditional 7.1 surround panner, and here is a 7.1.2 Atmos panner utilizing the Z-axis. Mixing in Atmos uses a combination of bed audio
So that's the bed on top.
and audio objects. Bed widths of 7.1.2 and 7.0.2 utilize the left and right overhead channels. When busing a track to a 7.0.2 or 7.1.2 bus, the panner changes to a 3D display and shows a height control. This allows the signal to be panned to the left and right overhead channels. Note that with beds, there is no front-back overhead control. When a track is assigned and mapped to an audio object, the panner appears the same. However, you have greater control of the signal, including full front-back control of the overhead signal in addition to left-right control. This track feeds an object input in the renderer and appears in the object view. The renderer records the audio and the XYZ coordinates from the panner.
So I don't know if the concept of bed and objects was clear. So you have the channel-based panner and you have the 3D object-based panner. So channel-based panner would basically, the moment you're in the front, it goes to your front channels, which are discrete speakers anyway. The moment you pull your sound into the surround, the chances are that if you have multiple speakers in the surround zone, those sounds will spill into multiple speakers. So it gets more and more diffused, so you lose the specificity of the image. But when you treat the same sound using an object panner, it remains fixed in space as to where you have placed it or where you have moved it. So it always follows the XYZ coordinate of the movement, and it will be reproduced exactly in the same way. It won't get kind of distributed into multiple speakers or get diffused. So that's the beauty of using audio elements as objects. And you can actually also play with the size of the object. So that's something very useful in doing in treating your sound in mixes. Sometimes you want a specific direction, but you want a little wider feel of that sound, a bigger feel of the sound, so you can actually increase the size of the object. When you do that, it then spills the sound into a few more speakers and makes the sound bigger, but it does it in a very beautiful way, unlike channel-based panning. So I think I'll just do a couple more slides, which I said about the simplified workflow. So basically, with Dolby Atmos, or what we call is the Atmos first workflow. So you start mixing in Atmos, and this is what I tell a lot of people, that irrespective of whether you were asked to mix only 5.1 or in Atmos, you should always start with Atmos. So even if you have to deliver only a 5.1 content, if you start mixing in Atmos, you have created a mix which is much bigger. And when you render that and deliver as 5.1, that 5.1 mix sounds much bigger, much better than a traditional 5.1 mix would allow you to make it sound. So you mix once in Atmos and you can deliver any format that you want. So you can deliver like 7.1, 5.1 stereo. You can even render a binaural, which can be listened to on mobile devices. And not only that, if you create your master, with all individual beds of dialogue, music, effects, and their corresponding objects, you have one master which can then deliver everything from your final mixes in any channel-based configuration or even stems. So you don't have to, and these can all be done offline, non-real time. So you don't have to do multiple passes sitting in the studio, listening to everything in real time, or bouncing, multiple passes for M&E, for a dialogue-only output, once for 5.1, once for stereo. You don't have to do that. You can do all of that in just one pass. So it really makes the life simple. for the engineer, and he can use all of that time into being more creative, rather than fighting for the deliveries and those delivery timelines. So again, these are some of the tools in the renderer that allow you to optimize the Atmos mix for any other listening format. So what you see here with the purple and pink rectangles, the bars, that's the binaural settings. So when you deliver an Atmos mix which goes to mobile devices, it will render the Atmos mix to binaural because you'll be listening on earpods or headphones. So you have binaural settings which set the distance mode for each element in the bed or the object, and you can, during your mix, audition that and set it to near, mid, far, or you can turn it off. And you can hear the result as to how is the headphone experience recreating the sense of that 3D space. So you have complete control of how it will sound like to the end user. Then there are downmix tools where you can again, the downmix from Atmos to 5.1 or 7.1, for example, or stereo. You can then control the front to surround balance because you have so many more elements. So when you fold it down, you may or may not like, what folds down from the surround information to the front channels. You might want to control that. So you have those controls. That all exists as metadata with the mix. And when the Atmos mix plays on a system which is only 5.1 capable, for example, it will use that metadata to reproduce that 5.1 mix exactly the way you wanted it to be heard. So it saves a lot of time. It really gives you the best possible output and across all possible listening environments and devices. I think I will end here. There's a few more slides about the playback environment. I can just glance through it. I mean, like I said in the very beginning, you have multiple environments where you can experience Atmos, from the cinemas to the home to when you're on the go, mobile devices, tablets, PCs, gaming devices, and there are multiple additional devices like smart speakers, soundbars, AVRs, all of those that support, including obviously your earpods, the AirPods Pro, AirPod Max, and the earbuds and all those things. So most of them have support for Atmos. On mobile devices, I already mentioned, so binaural is something which is very important. It helps to recreate that 3D immersive experience just using your headphones, which was not possible with stereo or 5.1. This is very, very important, and this is what is also making, platforms and services, all the OTT platforms and services, because in India, a large part of the subscriber base still watches or consumes a lot of content on mobile devices. And till now, they could only experience stereo. 5.1 cannot be delivered or experienced on mobile devices. It does not work. But with Atmos, you can actually experience that 3D immersive mix or the sound that was created just using the headphones. So that is a beauty. And this is a very big pull because users can actually feel a major experiential benefit. And this is what is pulling OTT services to, switch over to Atmos, because a large subscriber base who are consuming content on mobile devices will now have that better experience. Yeah, so and in the homes, obviously, you have either discrete speakers, or you have, again, speakers with up-firing modules for overheads, which recreate the overheads. That's the second one. And otherwise, you have the Atmos-enabled soundbars. So these are, again, some of the devices, various flavors of devices that allow you to enjoy Atmos experience. I mean, I'll just, this is one slide. I talked about the automotive experience. So as you can see, we have Lucid, Mercedes, and the three Chinese car manufacturers. They already have models which are launched with Dolby Atmos. And very soon you will hear the news of Indian manufacturers launching some models with Dolby Atmos. So this is really the next big revolution in that sense, because a lot of us, I mean, you would all probably agree that in our busy schedules, the only time we actually listen to music today is when we are sitting in the car, driving to work or back home. And that's the only time we have to experience or enjoy music. So it's a very big draw that if you can listen to music in a much better way, in your car, then that is really something which people would prefer. And that is why this is really becoming, big. And I mean, music as well as podcast. So, podcast is something which I think a lot of people can actually start focusing on, because it's pure audio storytelling and it's growing popularity, because podcasts is something where, you can listen to podcasts while you're doing something else, because you don't have to watch something else. That gives you a lot of freedom to listen to podcasts when you're doing something else. And like, I listen to podcasts when I'm doing my morning walks. Okay, and I've seen a lot of people doing that. So, and if that experience can be, immersive, better. So nothing like it. Just one last slide, just to show you the momentum, like, so. So you can see that we look at the entire ecosystem in three broad divisions. So we say we create the content. So you have the content creators. So you have the studios, production houses, individual content creators. Then you have the middle part of the ecosystem which distributes that content. So it takes the content from the creators. It either goes to the OTT platforms, or it gets delivered to cinemas, or it gets delivered to music platforms, whatever it be. And then is where the end user experiences, so the consumers who will be actually listening to that content or watching that content. And the kind of, I mean, obviously it doesn't capture every possible player or, manufacturer and device, but it just shows you, the kind of support. So the reason people have a lot of faith in Dolby and in Dolby technologies is also because of this, that we do not just build a technology and just tell people, okay, now try and use it and do whatever you want. We put in our energies to see that, we support from the beginning to the end. So that entire ecosystem support is done, by various people, like some of us, like engineers like us, support in the content creation part. There are engineers who help the OTT platforms and other services to initially enable and then, carry on with any future upgrades or any technical support that is required. And then you have the OEMs and the whole plethora of devices which the consumers can, access to experience. So that brings me to pretty much the end. This is just one more slide, just to show you some statistics of how many devices globally are, enabled with Dolby Atmos. And then there is a lot more that have the Dolby audio, I mean, just which have support for Dolby 5.1 as well, but maybe not Atmos. So that's many more billions of devices for that. This is one important slide. So anybody who's interested to get started with the hands-on, experience with creating something in Atmos, so you can just go to our website, which is professionalsupport@dolby.com, and you can see there are different sections, dedicated to especially audio post and music. Then there's dedicated section for post-production. Then there's for Atmos and Vision. Vision is our technology that goes into the televisions, mobile devices. It takes care of the visual or imaging technology. And then if you go to this page. I mean, the links in the other page will eventually bring you here. Here you can see that you have a free trial for the renderer, a 90-day, 3 months trial, which is you can download for free and use it and get familiar with the entire process of creating content in Atmos. I think that's very useful. And the best part is, like we say that creating content in Atmos can be very, very simple to start with. So like I call it like a starter experience. Then you have an advanced experience where you actually have a full-fledged studio and hand gear, or then you can have the premium experience where you have many more equipment to aid, but that's may or may not be essentially required. So the starter is as simple as just a laptop and a pair of headphones, because the renderer takes care of everything. So the renderer can give you various monitoring modes. So although your mix will have 128 objects, tracks of audio in it, the renderer will render it in any possible monitor format that you have access to. In case of a laptop and headphone, it will render everything to stereo in binaural mode. So while mixing on your laptop with headphones, you can actually hear the entire mix in an immersive format, and you know how it will sound like. And that's what a lot of people are doing, especially people doing music. I think a lot of you know that we don't have those big music studios anymore. I mean, we have just a few. A lot of music creation happens in home studios on, as much as just laptops and headphones. And there are a lot of people in the last 2 to 3 years, starting from the pandemic, that actually mixed and released a lot of songs just working on a laptop and a pair of headphones. So just to get started, I'm not saying that that's the only way to create, but I'm saying that if you're really interested, if you want to try your hand, and there are a lot of things that you can do with just a laptop and headphone, because music and podcast are today essentially consumed on mobile devices with headphones. Very few people actually listen to music or podcast in a living room setup with a home theater system, because you're listening to the final product on headphones. So it actually does justice to also create it using headphones. You get a pretty good translation. Obviously, if you want to be very, very precise and you want to hear your mix critically, you can take that mix to a studio setup and listen to it and then make some changes or corrections. But just to get started, you can do it with just your headphones. And there are a whole bunch of other tools. The renderer is the main. Then for people doing a lot of music work, there's the Dolby Atmos assembler tool. Basically what it allows you to do is, and this was a big demand from a lot of people doing music. Traditionally, music mix engineers, after they have done a mix, they do the last final process called mastering. Either they do it themselves or they would send it to a specialist who's a mastering engineer, who would then master the audio. And typically this was even more necessary for albums where you have multiple songs have been mixed, sometimes mixed by different engineers as well. So each song would have a slightly different, texture or sound. And when you put it in an album, you want it to sound very similar in terms of the overall, texture of it. With Atmos, you did not have those tools to start with, because in Atmos, you don't have a channel-based output which you can process. Most of the processing tools are channel-based today. So Atmos Assembler, the latest version, has the tools which allow you to drop in your individual songs, and then you can actually do like limiting, master EQ, compression, all of that, and it does a lot of other things. It can also help you to join, edit stuff if you want, and things like that. So it is of interest. So once you have mixed songs in Atmos, you can drop it into the Atmos album assembler, and you can do something similar to the traditional mastering process. So that is a useful tool for people doing a lot of music mixes. And then obviously the music panner and the binaural settings plugin, those are again tools which are very, very useful for mixing content, either music or any other content, be it podcast, be it AV content, even theatrical or OTT content. And then you have the conversion tool. I mean, this is a tool which is used by very few people. This is typically used when you have to do a frame rate conversion for some purpose. So it allows you to convert your Atmos master from one frame rate to another, and the new version allows you to do it without any pitch change. So that is very, very useful. And people who are really interested in designing rooms or setting up studios, I did a session last year, where I talked only about it. So the Dolby Atmos room design tool, that's a Excel-based tool, and that allows you to, pretty much design and build your studio just using that Excel tool. And you can check everything from what should be the room dimensions, what should be the monitoring requirements, what should be the acoustic requirements. All of these can be, designed or kind of checked and verified using the tool. And after having done everything, you can start the actual process of setting up your room. It's a very useful tool. It's a free tool. Most of these you will find on our website. So if you look for it, the Atmos assembler, you have a trial again for 90 days. But if you want to use it beyond the trial period, free trial, you have to buy it from the Avid website, Avid store. So the renderer and the album assembler are paid tools. This album assembler is just $99 one-time purchase. All the other tools are basically free tools, so you can use it. One last time, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
The question was actually how to start up, and you actually told it right now. But
Okay.
I want to know, when will the Atmos renderer come for Windows? It's still in...
So there is a version that works for Windows. The new version of the renderer will also work on Windows, but in Windows, it does not support the equivalent of what we have, the Dolby Audio Bridge. So the renderer works on Windows, but what you don't have, or what is missing, is the equivalent of the Dolby Audio Bridge. So what kind of a setup are you using?
It's basically a laptop, HP laptop.
So if you're working on a Windows laptop, on a Windows-based DAW, and you want the Windows-based renderer, so the renderer is there for Windows. But what you cannot do is you cannot send audio from your DAW to the to the renderer, because that Dolby Audio Bridge, which is like a virtual sound card, which is only available on the Mac because it works with Core Audio. So there are some equivalent of the Dolby Audio Bridge. So you have Pyramix. They have a similar virtual tool, but you can try it out. And if you go to our knowledge base, if you go to the professionalsupport.com page and then go to the knowledge base from there, you can search for all these keywords. You will come across posts that explain how you can use the Atmos renderer on Windows systems. Typically, the Windows systems work as a dedicated renderer running on a separate system, and you have to have a physical hardware pipeline for the audio. So from your DAW to the Windows-based renderer, so you have to have a hardware audio connection. But yeah, like I said, so Pyramix has a virtual audio solution which people have figured out how to work. It's a bit complicated, not as simple as the Dolby Audio Bridge, but yes, there is a workaround, so you can try it out.
So, and I also want to know, like, you said it is easy to convert from like down mix from Atmos to even binaural or stereo or what.
Right.
Like, is it basically a plugin, like a down mixer plugin that?
It's not a plugin, so I mean it's part of the renderer.
Okay, it's part of it. Okay.
So if you see, that's my Dolby Atmos renderer. Obviously, I'm not running my DAW right now, so you won't see any audio coming in, but I'll show you what happens. So there's an option which says re-renders. So this is where you set up what kind of re-renders do you want from your Atmos mix. By default, when you open up, it'll always have a 7.1, a 5.1 and a stereo. You can create any number of different types of re-renders. So as you can see, I have created a 5.1.4 re-render, I have created a binaural re-render, and I mean you can always try to check what are the different renderings possible. So you can start with stereo, so as low as a 2-channel render of the Atmos mix, 5.0, 5.1, so you can see, there are multiple combinations possible. You can even render ambisonics from the Atmos, and there's a loudness render that is for loudness measurements. So that's how it works. So you can configure what kind of re-renders you want, and then once you have that, okay, let me load some. So I have a short audio clip master file, and I've loaded that. You can see there's a file name that comes up. If I play it, it'll play. So this is a Atmos on-off demo. So you can see right now only, the bed channels are playing. So there's only LCR information. Now you see objects, and now you can see all those objects. Okay. So this is how, and this is a Atmos mix. It's a very simple Atmos mix. Just if I want to do a re-render, I can go to File and Export Audio. I can select re-renders, and then I have whatever re-renders I have already created in the template. It'll give me all the options. I can select whatever I want, and I can then export it. So it's not really a plugin tool. It's a real-time renderer algorithm that is running. It'll take all the inputs from either your master file or what is coming in, and it'll render based on the output configuration. So whether it's stereo, whether it's 5.1, 7.1, whatever it is. So it'll look at the number of inputs, look at what output configuration is required, and it'll do a real-time render. Or in this case, it'll do an offline re-render.
And you get a wave file, audio wave file?
Yes.
Okay.
You can get either discrete files, wave files, or you can get interleaved. So you can get multi-mono or interleaved wave files. So thank you very much for attending this session, and hope you had a good time all these 3 days. Look forward to seeing you again sometime. Thank you, everybody.
So I would like you to stay on stage to have a small token of appreciation from Mrs. Smita Rai, our director, Palm AVICN. Can we please have you at the center? Audience, please give a round of applause for such an amazing, wonderful session by Bhaskar.